Chapter 10, Motivating Students to Learn. Our organizing questions are, what is motivation? We talk about being motivated, but what really is it? And then what are some of the theories of motivation? And then how can achievement motivation be enhanced? How do we get kids to care and want to be motivated about achievement? And then how do you, as a teacher, or how do people increase students' motivation to learn? You can even learn how to motivate yourself. So motivation is an internal process which activates, guides, and maintains behavior over time. Intensity and direction vary depending on the task. And then there's different sources of motivation. You can look at motivation as a personal characteristic. Some people are just tend to be motivated, just that's their personality type. And then there's intrinsic characteristics of the task. Sometimes you're really motivated maybe to play a sport, or you might be really motivated because you love computers or you love math. So there's the intrinsic motivation of it. Like my husband loves to run, but I can honestly tell you that that is the least motivational thing for me. Like you said, run, I would say no, you could walk. And then there's sources extrinsic to a task as well. Some kind of reward that you could possibly get, that you do it because you're looking for praise, or you might be getting some kind of monetary reward or grades or something like that. So there's different ways of theories to look at motivation. And the first one we look at is behavioral learning theory. Behaviorists said that motivation had to do with rewards and reinforcement, or rewards and punishment. And we really think that for a real long time that people thought, you just found the right reward that was going to motivate children. But it was really an inadequate explanation for human motivation, because it wasn't universal. You could say, I could pay you $50 for you to get a good grade in your next test. Some of you might be like, okay, it's worth it. But if something else came up, you might say, well, you know what, it's really not worth $50. And some of you might say, I really don't need the $50. It doesn't really matter. So motivation really the reward is not necessarily something that that's going to make you do well in something. Somebody else, it might be something just internal. And you might say, I'm just going to do well in this because I want to do well. So human motivation is really highly complex, and it's context bound, which means that it really depends. Some of you may be motivated to play a musical instrument, and you'll practice and practice and practice. I've seen children who want to be basketball players or baseball players, and they will be out there swinging that bat until their body is sore. Some of my friends who are runners, I can't believe the stuff they put them through. My husband gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer when he doesn't have to, or 4:30 sometimes, just so he can run when it's not hot out. That takes a lot of dedication, but it takes a lot of commitment as well. So it's context bound, and it changes for everyone. There are potential reinforcers, but they're determined by personal and situational factors. As I talked about before when we were talking about intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards in the chapter 5 on behaviorism, I talked about the boy who wanted to weed the garden with Mr. Mendoza as his reward. That would never be anything that I would think of doing as a reward for doing your schoolwork, but yet it worked for him. So in the classroom, it's really difficult to determine what motivations elicit behaviors. Sometimes just a certain subject is very motivational to a child. I had a kid that would study anything on snakes. If it had something to do with snakes, he was all about it. If I could think of any way to teach anything with snakes, he would learn it. But you have to listen to children, and you kind of have to pick up on those little things in order to do it. There's some of you do as well, that you're motivated on subjects that interest you. So like in classes that interest you, you'll do well. And then in classes that don't interest you that much, you just do average. Don't put in that extra effort. Maslow's got another theory of motivation, and we've used this quite a lot. Maslow actually was looking at self-actualization, and when he started talking about self-actualization, what he was really talking about was the desire to become everything that one is capable of becoming. Self-actualization is characterized by acceptance of self and others, spontaneity, openness, and relatively deep but democratic relationships with others, creativity, humor, and independence. In essence, it's being the best psychological person that you could possibly be. And Maslow believed that everyone was trying to reach self-actualization. But he found that when he was looking at that he came up with two different areas. He came up with deficiency needs and then growth needs. And he said the deficiency needs were things like physiological needs, like just being healthy, your physiological needs, things like food, water, things like that. And then he also talked about your physical and psychological well-being, safety, love, self-esteem. So when we look at these things, your physiological things like food and water and stuff like that, and then your safety needs, feeling safe and secure in your environment. And then that idea of belongingness and love needs, that you're cared about and that you belong in that group. And then that and by the way, each one of these steps has to have some sort, of mastery. At some point or another, you have to feel like it's a little bit complete, because according to Maslow, you couldn't get to those those growth needs unless those deficiency needs were at least met at the basic level. So if you have a child who is homeless or is worried about his next meal and doesn't have shelter or warmth and stuff like that are physiological needs, then they're going to have a really hard time. They're not going to feel safe. They're not going to feel like they belong. And then their self-esteem is going to suffer. So, but that's why a lot of schools do free and reduced lunch, and they're always looking for ways to get like children that are homeless into some kind of temporary shelter or something like that. And then we also have to look at safety needs, that once they're in a stable and secure environment, then they kind of feel safe. A lot of kids had a real hard time when schools are not considered to be safe zones. So if you look up into growth needs and you see need to know and understand, you can see how some kids struggle. Because if they're in a home that doesn't have the love and support that they need, they're not going to be grasping for that growth needs of need to know and understand. So Maslow talked about trying to meet these. Now, as a teacher, it's kind of hard. You can meet their physiological needs and making sure that they get fed and stuff like that in the school. And you can make sure that your classroom is a safe and secure environment. And you can make sure that kids feel like they belong there and that you care about them. And then that will help with the esteem needs, because one of the things that we can do as teachers is kind of build children's self-esteem. And that doesn't mean just filling them with saccharin, sugar-coating stuff. That means like really helping them succeed and celebrating those small successes. So if you get a little bit of leverage in each one of these deficiency needs, then you're going to get to that idea of needing to know and understand. That they're going to have that motivation to kind of understand what's going on. Aesthetic needs is more like the pleasure things. It's the arts. It's caring about the environment. It's all that kind of stuff that goes along with being aesthetically giving back to your community as well. And that gets to that whole idea of self-actualization. That goes along with that. So there's been a lot of research done showing that kids who struggle tend to live kind of more in the deficiency part of the pyramid, and it makes it more difficult for them to get to the growth part. Now, resilient children can jump to that growth need, and yet their deficiency needs have not completely been met, and we're not exactly sure how to do that. And that's one of those ideas of why motivation theories come into play, because you've heard of starving artists before, and people that will forsake eating and home and stuff like that to be an artist. I have a friend of mine whose brother is a brilliant artist, and he actually lives in like this little one-room shack in the Tennessee mountains, and he makes art out of things that he finds in nature, and he even has an outhouse, and he goes into town every so often, sells his art to people. But he doesn't he has like these distributors that come and get his art, and he makes good money, but he doesn't care about any of that other stuff. He lives by himself, but he forsakes all for the sake of his art. So there are other people that are kind of resilient that goes along with that. So there have been some discrepancies in Maslow's theories, but for the most part, you can say that he's pretty head on that. Self-esteem, belongingness, and love. As a teacher, there's not a lot you can do. You can't take every kid home with you, but you can make sure that those needs are met, because it's much easier to get up to growth needs if your deficiency needs are met. So when we talk about deficiency needs, they're critical to physical and psychological well-being. Once satisfied, the needs to satisfy them diminishes. So you don't worry about them as much. Your growth needs, the need to understand and appreciate the world around us, never can be satisfied. You're always going to want more. Once you get to that growth level, it's like feeding. Now that might be why my girlfriend's brother is able to do that kind of stuff and forsake his deficit needs, because he grew up in a pretty stable home and, you know, didn't really have any needs when he was younger. So maybe that's how we can do that. But it's that desire to become everything one is capable of becoming. Motivation and the attribution theory. Attribution theory is another theory that comes up when we talk about motivation, and it deals with ways people explain success and failure. And the characteristics about the attribution theory are internal within the person, or they're external, where they think it's being done to them. And they can be stable or they can be unstable. And they can be controllable and uncontrollable. So if you're an internal person, you tend to have stable, controllable. So you say, okay, I have control over what I'm doing. On the chart on page 10.1, let me go back. Yeah, let me go. On the chart on page 10.1, it really, if it's internal causes of locus of control or local, it's stable. And then you'll say, if it's internal, you say, I have ability, I'm smart, or it might be stable that you say, I'm stupid. You know, you just say, you know, it's internal and you just say, I'm stupid. If it's external though, the task is difficult, or you might say it was too easy, or you might say it was too hard. I didn't do very well because the task was really, really hard. If it's unstable though, if it's internal, you look at your effort. You say, how much effort did I put in this? I tried hard. Or sometimes you'll just say, you know what, I didn't do very well in that test because I didn't study at all. Something came up and I didn't study at all. If it's unstable and it's external, you really rely on luck. Oh, I got so lucky. I can't believe I did well in that test. It was so lucky. Or you'll say, I had really bad luck. Oh, you wouldn't believe what happened. I had the worst luck. You know, I got the only prompt that I didn't study. It was the worst luck ever. And so when we look at attribution theory, we look at ability, which is stable and internal, effort, and it can be altered, and it's internal. And then we look at the task difficulty, and that can be stable and external. And then we look at luck, and luck is unstable and it's uncontrollable. That's why if you ever see me and you're having a big test, I don't say good luck. I say good knowledge, because one of the things that luck really doesn't have anything to do with it. Another thing that goes along with this attribution theory, and really when we look at attribution theory and you deal with primarily with 4 expectations for success and failure, it's ability, effort, task difficulty, and luck. Ability and effort attributions are internal to the individual. Task difficulty and luck attributions are external. And that brings us to the idea of locus of control. And this is really what loci means. You know, locus means location. And if you have an internal locus of control, the person is responsible for their success and failure. High internal locus of control typically results in school success because the child takes, or the person takes, ownership of their own abilities. They're like, you know what? I have control over this. Sorry. They believe that their success or failure is a result of his or her own efforts or ability. Someone with an external locus of control is more likely to believe that other factors such as luck, task difficulty, or other people's actions causes their success or failure. I failed because, you know, my teacher was really bad, or my teacher didn't teach us that, or something like that. External locus of control is always other people's actions. They can always come up with an excuse of why they didn't do it. Why they didn't do well. So if you have a high internal locus of control, kids tend to have better grades and test scores than do kids with the same exact intelligence who have low internal locus of control. So it gets that idea of low self-efficacy results in limited school success. So if you believe that you don't have any control over your grades, then you have a low self-efficacy because you think that everyone else is controlling how you do. Now, a lot of teachers, your book doesn't talk too much about this, but this is the newest thing that is coming out in education. It's called this idea of mindset, and it goes into locus of control. And teachers are trying to teach children to have something called a growth mindset. The growth mindset is, if you have a growth mindset, you would say failure is an opportunity to grow. We learn just as much from our failures as we do from our successes. And they would say things like, I can learn to do anything I want. As long as you put your mind to it, you can learn it. You may not be good at it, but you can learn it. Challenges help me grow. And then my efforts and attitudes determine my abilities. So if I put in the effort and if I believe I can do it, that's going to affect my abilities. Feedback, when you get feedback on something, it's constructive because you don't just want to hear that you're doing a good job. You want to get better at it. Those of you that are musicians out there, and I think I got a couple people in the class, when you play something and you know it wasn't your best, you want somebody to give you that constructive feedback. You want to hear how you can tweak it and make it a little bit better. And if somebody just keeps telling you something's good, and we're going to get to this at the end of the chapter, and it's not really, and you know it's not your best, then you discard it and you just don't think it's worthy of thinking about. I am inspired by the success of others. I don't get jealous that other people do well. I get inspired by them. I'm excited for them because I can learn from them. And then I like to try new things because trying new things means learning new things. If you have a fixed mindset, which would mean you probably have an external locus of control, failure is the limit of my abilities. I am either good at it or I am not. My abilities are unchanging. I can either do it or I can't. I don't like to be challenged. And that would be like, to be honest with you, my husband has a fixed mindset. He doesn't try anything. He'll go, I don't know how to do that. And I'll say, but try it. And he'll say, I don't know how to do it. I'm like, but you can try. I mean, he's a very intelligent man, much more intelligent than I am. And he would say like sometimes I'll say, he'll say, do you know how to do blah, blah, blah? And I'll go, no, not really. But let me look at it. And he'll go, if you don't know how to do it, don't try to do it. Well, yeah, I'm going to try to do it. And the bad part is I usually succeed. And that really pisses him off. My potential is predetermined. Like he will tell you I'm not good at something, so therefore I'm not going to try it. When I'm frustrated, I give up. Feedback and criticisms are personal. This happens to him all the time. Like he'll say, what do you think I am? I'm stupid? I'm like, no, I don't think you were stupid. I'm just giving you my input. I stick to what I know. And that's pretty much, if he's good at something, he will do it. If he's not, he won't do it. Drives me absolutely bonkers. So growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Now, how do you coach a growth mindset? Obviously, a growth mindset is something that is going to increase your motivation. It's going to help you do something. So 5 questions to develop a growth mindset. If you've got a fixed mindset, you can break it. It can change. You say, what did you learn from today's performance? My son kind of follows in his father's footsteps a little bit, where he questions his abilities, and he's real smart, and he questions his abilities, and he doesn't like to be wrong. So like he just recently got a D in Calc 3. A 69.7, but they don't round up. But his teacher told him that he could have gotten a C- if you just add. He's like, it was 0.3. I would have given you a C-. But he didn't go ask because they got a nasty letter that said don't beg for any points, so he wouldn't do it. But he said to me, I can't believe I'm taking this over again because he needs it. He needs to have a good grade on it for his major. He's like, I can't believe I'm taking this over again. And he's never failed at anything in his life. The lowest grade he's ever gotten is a B. And so I said to him, honey, he's taken over again. I said, are you learning it? And he goes, oh yeah, I understand it a lot better now. And I said, then what's the problem? It's not about the grade. It's about learning. School is about learning. Life is about learning. So what did you learn from today's performance? What did you learn from how you did this? Did you learn that you shouldn't do it that way? When you keep doing something, the same thing over and over again, then you're not doing it right. And it's not working for you, then you're not doing it right. Rethink it. What steps did you take to make you successful today? When it does work, examine what you did differently that makes you successful. What are some different strategies you could have used? When you're not successful, what could we have done differently? How did you keep going when things got tough? As I told you before, Ron Clark says, if it's not worth doing, if it's not worth crying over, struggle in life can be really hard, and you've got to start thinking about that it's not just going to be a walk in the park. What can you learn from your opponent today? Somebody who beat you, somebody who's better than you. What can you learn from them? Not to be angry at them or diss them or say, blah, blah, blah about them. What can you learn from them? So if you want to comment, you want to give comments to kids or change the way you are, this will be a challenge concept to learn, but I believe you can master it. So when you're coaching somebody, you're saying, you know what, this is going to be hard, but you can master it. And Ron will say that to those 5th graders. All of you are going to cry at one time this year, but you know what? That means that you're going to work. And you know what else? When parents come in and complain, or the kid comes in and complains, I haven't seen you at lunch. I haven't seen you in lunch tutoring. I haven't seen you in after school tutoring. I don't remember you asking for help. And they'll say, okay, this is really challenging, but I believe you can master it, and I'm going to be here for you. You haven't got it yet, but you will if you keep working and thinking about it. It's going to come to you. This is hard, but you're going to get it. I really appreciate your effort today, because so many times we focus on the grade, not on the effort. It's okay to take risks. That's how we learn. So sometimes you just say to a kid, it's okay to get it wrong. That's how you learn. We learn from our mistakes. Getting better takes time, and I see that you are improving. So you're kind of, encouraging that kid to step out of the box and not put as much emphasis on the grades. My daughter right now is taking her IB exams, and she said, Mom, what if I don't get my IB diploma? And I looked at her and said, did you learn to think differently in IB? Do you think you're a better thinker for going through the IB program? And she's had a lot of she had a pretty big medical problems, and she stuck it out in the hard program. And she goes, yeah, I definitely think that. And I go, then it's all worth it. Doesn't matter, honey. Doesn't matter at all. So when you develop a growth mindset, instead of I'm not good at this, instead of I'm not good at this, try thinking, what am I missing? If you say I give up, you can try thinking, I'll use a different strategy. Instead of I'm not good enough or it's good enough, you say, is this really my best work? A lot of times you'll say, it's good enough. And then you say, is this really my best work? Does this represent the best of me? I can't make this any better. And instead you say, I can always improve. I will tell you that I never stop improving. Matter of fact, when I was thinking I can improve, when I was teaching, some of the people in my school would say, oh, you're one of the best teachers we have, blah, 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 blah. And I'd get all this praise from the downtown and stuff like that. And I would say, I always mark myself down and needs improvement, because I could see faults and things that I could do differently all the time. I made a mistake. Instead of saying that and beating yourself up for it, you say mistakes can help me learn. If you say I can't do this, you say I'm going to train my brain. I'm going to train it. I'm going to be different. I'll never be that smart. And you say I will learn how to do this. Instead of saying I'm never going to be that smart, you say, you know what? I can learn how to do this. I may not be the best at it, but I can do it. Plan A didn't work. There's always a plan B. My friend can do it. And you say, you know what? I can learn from them. Learn from your friends. Apprentice with them. Learn from what they know.